The night stretched long and heavy, the kind of night when exhaustion sank into Sarah's bones, but bills left her no choice but to keep driving. The city lights flickered on the windshield as her rideshare app buzzed with one last request. She accepted it quickly, whispering to herself that after this ride she would finally go home, kiss her sleeping son on the forehead, and collapse into bed. The pickup location flashed across the screen, an upscale bar in the wealthiest part of town, a place she had only ever passed by on her way to cheaper grocery stores. When she arrived, the sidewalk glowed with neon lights and laughter spilled out of the entrance, but her passenger wasn't laughing. A man in an expensive charcoal gray suit stood at the edge of the curb, his tie loose and his posture unsteady. He looked like he had walked out of a glossy magazine cover, except his shoulders sagged as though the weight of the world pressed against them. His eyes, glazed with alcohol, carried a loneliness that struck Sarah unexpectedly. She rolled down the window. "Are you Mr. Davis?" she asked, reading the name on her phone. He gave a half nod, almost collapsing into himself. Concern tugged at her, and she got out, steadying him with her arm. The smell of whiskey clung to his breath, but beneath that, she caught the faint trace of expensive cologne. His hand brushed against hers, cold and trembling, and for a second he looked at her like he was searching for something, an anchor, a bit of steadiness in his storm. With effort, she guided him into the back seat. "Home," he muttered, closing his eyes as his head fell back against the leather cushion. His tone was commanding, but the slur softened it, made him sound almost helpless. As she pulled into the traffic, Sarah's gaze flickered to the rearview mirror. His features in repose were sharp and proud, the kind of face she imagined on a man who had never once worried about overdue rent or an empty fridge. And yet here he was, slumped in the back of a stranger's car, as if stripped of all the power and control his tailored suit represented. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the engine. Sarah should have felt annoyed, another drunk rich man she had to babysit for a fare. But there was something different about him, something that made her heart tighten. He didn't just look drunk. He looked broken, like someone who had fought too many battles alone and finally gave in, if only for tonight. By the time she turned onto the long stretch of road leading to his address, she realized she was more awake than ever, curiosity stirring in her chest. Who was he really, beneath all that wealth and weariness? And why did she feel as though this ride, this moment, would linger far beyond the night? The car slowed as Sarah followed the GPS through a quiet neighborhood, far different from the streets she called home. Towering iron gates opened automatically, and she found herself driving up a long driveway lined with sculpted hedges and glowing garden lights. The house that appeared at the end took her breath away, more like a mansion than a home, with tall glass windows, marble pillars, and a silence that made it feel almost unreal. For a moment, Sarah felt a stab of discomfort. This wasn't her world. She shouldn't even be here. She parked near the entrance, glanced back, and saw her passenger barely awake, his head leaning against the window. "We're here," she said softly. He groaned, trying to sit up, but his body betrayed him, heavy with drink. Against her better judgment, she got out and walked around to open the door. "Come on," she murmured, looping his arm over her shoulder. He towered over her, the weight of his body nearly pulling her off balance. His steps were clumsy, uncoordinated, but she refused to let him collapse on the pristine driveway. The smell of expensive whiskey mixed with his cologne lingered in the air as she half-guided, half-carried him up the wide stone steps. The front door wasn't locked. When she pushed it open, the sheer emptiness hit her harder than the mansion's size. It was immaculate, polished, and grand, but lifeless. No family pictures lined the walls, no signs of laughter or warmth. Just cold perfection. Sarah swallowed, her chest tightening as she thought of her small apartment with toys scattered on the floor, her son's drawings taped proudly to the fridge. That was chaos, yes, but it was alive. This place was a hollow shell. She helped him into the vast living room, where leather couches sat untouched beside a fireplace that hadn't been lit in who knew how long. He collapsed onto the couch, one hand brushing against his forehead as though weighed down by more than alcohol. His eyes fluttered half open, and for the first time since she picked him up, he spoke clearly enough for her to understand. "I have everything, but nothing at all," he whispered, his voice thick with exhaustion and pain. The words stunned her. They didn't sound like the drunken ramblings of a spoiled rich man. They sounded like a confession, a truth that slipped free when his walls were down. Sarah stood there, unsure if she should comfort him or just leave. But before she could respond, his eyes closed again, and he drifted into sleep. She took a deep breath, placing a folded blanket she found draped over a chair across his shoulders. For a moment, she allowed herself to study him, the strong jawline, the faint lines of stress etched into his forehead, the lonely curve of his mouth. Then she quietly let herself out, the image of the grand but empty house burning in her mind. As she drove back through the gates and onto the main road, her thoughts refused to settle. His words echoed in her ears, lingering like a secret she wasn't meant to hear. She knew she shouldn't care. He was just a passenger, another ride. Yet she couldn't shake the strange feeling that, somehow, their lives had brushed together for a reason. Sarah never expected to see him again. In her world, rides were temporary encounters, faces that faded the moment the car door closed. But a week later, as she glanced at her phone, her heart skipped. The request had his name on it. For a second, she hesitated, wondering if it was coincidence or intentional. Curiosity won over caution, and she accepted. When she pulled up outside a sleek corporate building, she almost didn't recognize him. This time, he wasn't slouched or drunk. He walked out with a purposeful stride, dressed in another sharp suit, his hair neatly styled, his eyes clear and piercing. Yet when he spotted her behind the wheel, his expression softened, almost as if he'd been hoping it would be her. "Sarah, right," he said as he slid into the passenger seat instead of the back. His voice was steady now, deep and commanding, but there was warmth in it too. She blinked. "You remember my name?" He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "I remember more than you think. You helped me that night when you didn't have to. Most people would have left me on the curb." She gripped the steering wheel tighter, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to being noticed, not in this way. "It was nothing. Just doing my job." "Not nothing," he said firmly. It meant something. The ride stretched longer than she expected, and this time, silence didn't fill the car. He asked about her, where she was from, if she had family. Sarah hesitated at first, but his genuine interest disarmed her. She told him about her son, about juggling 2 jobs, about the exhaustion that never seemed to leave her bones. She spoke carefully, afraid she might sound like she was complaining, but he listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful, almost pained. "You're raising him on your own?" he asked gently. She nodded. "It's not easy, but he's my world." A small smile tugged at her lips as she thought of her little boy. "He keeps me going." For a moment, silence returned, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He looked out the window, then back at her, his eyes softer now. "I admire that," he murmured. "I've built companies, signed deals worth millions, but I've never built something that really matters." "Not like you have." Sarah blinked at him, caught off guard. Nobody had ever spoken to her that way, like her struggles and sacrifices were more meaningful than his wealth and success. Her heart thudded in her chest, and she quickly looked back at the road. By the time she dropped him off, the air between them felt different. He paused before getting out, his hand lingering on the door handle. "Would it be all right if I requested you again sometime? Not just for a ride, but maybe for a conversation?" Sarah's breath caught. Part of her wanted to say no, her life was complicated enough. But another part of her, the part that had felt invisible for so long, wanted to say yes. She only gave him a small nod, and he smiled, the kind of smile that hinted at something just beginning. As he walked away, Sarah sat there in her car, her heart racing. She had no idea why someone like him wanted to know someone like her. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. Weeks slipped into months, and what began as chance meetings in the car slowly grew into something neither of them could ignore. At first, it was simple. He would request her as a driver, and they'd talk on the way to his office or meetings. But soon those rides stretched into coffee stops, shared dinners, and evenings where he insisted on walking her to her door, even if it meant standing awkwardly in the dimly lit hallway of her modest apartment building. For Sarah, it was strange letting someone into her world. She had been alone for so long, used to carrying the weight of responsibility without a hand to hold. Her life was a rhythm of working, cooking, tucking her son into bed, and repeating the cycle until her body gave in. But with him, something shifted. He didn't try to take over her struggles, nor did he pity her. Instead, he showed up, steady, present, and willing to stand beside her even in the little things. The first time he met her son, it wasn't planned. She had to pick him up from school and didn't want to cancel her ride, so she brought him along. She expected tension, maybe indifference, but to her surprise, he crouched down to the boy's level, shaking his hand as though meeting an equal. Within minutes, they were laughing about superheroes, and Sarah found herself standing there, heart aching at the sight. She hadn't realized how much she missed having someone share those small, precious moments. As weeks passed, he became more present in their lives. He attended her son's school play, clapping louder than anyone else in the audience. He carried grocery bags into her kitchen without being asked, making jokes about how he couldn't tell the difference between budget and brand-name cereal. He would sit at her table with a loosened tie, sipping tea instead of whiskey, listening to her stories about the past, her dreams for the future, her quiet fears of never being enough. One evening, after dinner, when her son had gone to bed, he lingered in the kitchen as she washed the dishes. The warm glow of the small apartment wrapped around them, so different from the cold luxury of his mansion. He leaned against the counter, watching her, and his voice softened in a way she had never heard before. "You changed me, Sarah," he said. She froze, a dish still in her hand. "What do you mean? I thought I had everything. Money, success, power. But it never filled the emptiness inside me. Then you came along, someone who had every reason to give up, yet you keep fighting, keep loving, keep building a life. You and your son, you gave me something I didn't know I was missing." Her throat tightened, emotions flooding in waves she couldn't control. "I don't know what to say." He stepped closer, gently taking her hand from the soapy water. "Don't say anything, just let me be here. With you, for both of you." Tears welled in her eyes, but for once, they weren't from exhaustion or loneliness. They were from hope, the kind she thought she had buried years ago. That night, Sarah realized she hadn't just driven a drunk man home. She had opened the door to something new, something real. And in return, he had given her what she had secretly longed for all along, not just love, but a partner, a family, a future brighter than she ever dared to imagine.